Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday and our live Q&A time. I'm Sudha Jamthe. I teach IoT and autonomous vehicle business at Stanford Continuing Studies and at driverlessworldschool.com. And I'm here for my weekly live Q&A as we talk about autonomous vehicle business, specifically focused on autonomous vehicle data, business model, and impact on industries planned for this week. So the way I would do that, if you're joining new, is I would tell you a little bit for the newcomers or people who have not heard this before to set a context and on this topic. And then you can interrupt me anytime and we can get started and I'll answer your questions. And as my students know me, I will find answers. If I know answers most of the time, because I've been at this space for a long time, I'll be able to tell you the answer or I'll go find it for you. And no question is a bad question. You can ask me anytime. And if it goes with the flow of the conversation, I'm happy to answer right away. Otherwise, I will make sure I'll get back to it. You can always remind me. Doesn't matter. And as you type your question on the right here in front of, I see it on the right in front of me, but I think you type your question in YouTube in your comment area. And as you're doing it, you will see other people. So one of the things that I take pride in is it is not just about me telling you something, but I find that each of us bring our experience and have answers. And as you're listening to something, you might be able to connect back from your experience somewhere else in a different field. And so feel free to comment or share relevant links. And I think I have to approve if you share a URL link, but that's okay. Okay. So thank you for joining me. I see the count of people going up. So thank you for joining me. So what is autonomous vehicle data? And to understand that, we need to have a context of what is autonomous vehicle business. We know what is autonomous vehicle business. The self-driving car, the bots, the delivery bots, the autonomous trucks, all kinds of vehicles that can drive independently without a human. And specifically, the autonomous vehicle, when we say autonomous vehicle or self-driving car, we are talking about the car as a software on wheels being able to drive itself using a piece of autonomous vehicle software. And there's tons of material out there teaching you about different models of how the car sees the road, how to do the object recognition, perception, stay in the lane, and that whole path planning and control. And that's not what I'm going to talk about. So if you're new here and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to learn about how to build, business, how to build the whole deep learning model about that, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But in this world of, hi Husha, thank you for joining me. Yes, thank you. So in this world where there are these autonomous vehicles coming in, the technology is being built, the technology is not quite there where it can run independently without a human. And so what I'm talking about is autonomous vehicle business is the business you build using one such vehicle. Could be a truck, could be a car or a bot, a delivery bot. It doesn't have to be a delivery bot, a bot, but they seem to be used as delivery bots unless, you can come up with something else. So the other thing is there are many businesses, existing businesses that are going to be disrupted because something becomes autonomous. And so one obvious thing is, since we were talking about delivery bots, the delivery business or anything which, that we have to move things from point A to point B, the logistics business, the actual delivery, the commerce, all of them are being disrupted already, right? So I'm talking about the actual using the tech stack and building businesses or industries that are going to be disrupted and what you can do about it, or what the opportunities are, and something totally new that has not been done that you could think of, like now we have so many bikes in pretty much every country, I would say. I went to Chile last month, and there were all these e-hailing and ride sharing, and all these bikes in every street corner. And if you in Santiago, so if you see, and I see that in San Francisco, we actually have ordinance on not um, uh, touching our streets with these bikes, as some people object. And so that has become mainstream. So when I talk about autonomous vehicle business, I'm talking about every business being disrupted, or you come up with a business solution for a problem that you're trying to solve, or you're creating a layer of tech that is going to help us to make this autonomous vehicle business happen easily. Maybe you're creating perception maps for the cars to see the road, or you're creating some kind of data stack, as one of my student group is doing, data stack in the car. And I believe that the entire tech stack that is moved to the mobile, and now we have some on the computer or some on the mobile, and with the cloud infrastructure, is actually going to move to the car. So I want to pause for a minute, and if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask me. Otherwise, I will keep going. Okay, so the important thing to know is expand your definition of what is autonomous vehicle business beyond just making a car to drive autonomously. It's not just the automotive business. So somebody was asking me, hey, have you taken a course in automotive, and you're talking about this topic? And I come from a software tech background, and I worked on the business side. I've built products. I've headed analytics functions. So my take on this is, I need to understand how the software works, because this becomes software on wheels, definitely. And beyond that, I need to know the software stack, and what does it mean to have a software lifecycle in the car, or do OTA in the car, how to do integration, and whether there will be an API platform for inside the car for building more apps. I'm very familiar with that, and I'm learning and keeping myself up to date on what is happening in the car space for that. But beyond that, one of my students actually showed me that you could actually put a dongle in the CAN bus, which is um, in the car, in most cars, and you can actually pull data, and you can see it in an app, and you can see what the car is sharing internally amongst the different systems. And the car, for people like me who are outside of the car space, the car has something called electronic control unit, ECU, and there are many ECU. Hi Toby, thank you for joining us. So there are many, I think there are about 80 plus ECUs that runs a car. So they isolate the electronics of the car into multiple different units like that, and they communicate with each other. So when you press the brake, or you're moving your steering, they are the power is being sent there, and that communication is being sent internally. Or if you have an electric car, how much charge is being stored, how much is left, things like that is all in the CAN bus. The car company has to decide how much data do they expose in the CAN bus, right? Otherwise, the data keeps going, and we might see it and we don't know what it is about, right? There might be some kind of data that we would see, but it won't mean anything to us. So there's a lot of software and a lot of cool gadgets out there which we can play with. So I've done that to pull that data to see, what does it look like? What data is in the car? I mean, my first thing thinking about the data in the car was the actual data in the brains of the car, what is running in the CAN bus. So that's how I saw it. So if you're interested in that, I can tell you, give you some URLs on where you can find one such dongle. You don't have to be super tech to do that. You insert that, what used to be the cigarette light holder space in the past cars. You just insert that, and the car spits out data. So at a minimum, people think of that as the data in the car. And that is data in the car. It's literally in the brains of the car. I am not talking just about that. That is going to tell us about the health of the car. And we've spoken this, Usha and Toby, one of the things I'm doing is I'm just getting us to a common place on what is autonomous vehicle data, because I've talked about this topic many, many times, but I have people who come and say, hey, you are teaching autonomous vehicle business course, and then you have this autonomous vehicle data course. What is data in the car? Or are these both courses the same, or what is different? Are you going to repeat? They underestimate the power of autonomous vehicle data and the business possibilities. And it goes back to understanding what are the different data and the possibilities with the data. So I thought I should get us to that common starting point. Unless you're going to stop me and ask me questions, then the floor is yours, and I will give priority to that one. So the new people who are joining or who are coming back looking at this, yeah, you're okay. Thank you, Usha. So, I was talking about data from the CAN bus that you can get, and I think that's something you should play with if you're a data person or new to the car. And it's not maybe there's a little bit of tech when you look at the data, or download an app to pull that data out. I would believe so, but it's not a big deal. It's not too complex. So, but that data is telling you about what the car is tracking in terms of the battery life and the electronics and what's going on inside the car. It's actually happening live when you drive the car too, right? So that is what I call as digital twins in the car. And somebody asked me, you keep saying digital twin. What is a digital twin? You never said that. So guilty of that. A digital twin is basically IoT terminology saying, hey, we put sensors on some physical asset and we are actually getting data from it. So what if we can track we can make a digital copy of a physical thing? And typically it is done for planes, for turbines, engines, that kind of thing, where there would be many, many parts, and they have many, many sensors, and they want to track everything. And so you could have a digital twin for a huge plane, or you could have a digital twin for that one bolt or a part. It could be at any level. But the digital twin is in a data sense, it's going to be time series of data from when the product is created through its life cycle. So you can track that, and you could actually find out what was the pressure, what was the humidity, and all that. And then you can actually have what was the usage when you say, hey, there was this pressure in it. Was the plane sitting in the tarmac and it got the pressure, or it was facing this humidity, or what was the usage, or where it was? So you could track it by time series, lat long, by the usage of what it is put to, what is happening in its life cycle. But the beauty of a digital twin is it is not just like a combined integration of multiple databases, but it is about the physics of that item. So if you have I saw this, I think University of Massachusetts did this digital twin exercise on a Tesla car engine, and they said, we are going to create a digital twin and put it through so much pressure and more tension to see the what its allowed benchmark is. And then they said we could actually crank out and put more pressure on it than its limit. Typically, if you actually put an expensive real engine, it would melt or burst or do something bad, right? And you could actually apply the physics saying at this temperature, this part is going to melt, or this part is going to catch fire, or that pressure is going to burst, and at some point it's going to burst. And so the physics of it is you actually apply that. So if you have experience playing with game development, or using Unity 3D and the like. Unity 3D is the game engine, open source, and I've played with it a little bit. And you actually have a physics engine, so you could get an object and you can say, here's a ball, and then it comes with all the physics of it. So you actually you put the ball, and it will actually have um, an experience you can add called gravity. And then before you add gravity, the ball would just fall down and then it'll go away from your screen. And then once you add gravity, then it will be pulled at that gravity rate, and it might bounce back. It might do things that a real thing would do. So that is what is a digital twin. So coming back to the car, we have data in the car, And I was talking about what is in the canvas that we can see. So the 3 digital twins are about the actual parts of the car and how the car parts are performing, and what is their torque, and what is the temperature, and if I press so much on the brake. I keep saying this example every time. I don't know if I press so much on the brake, but if I press too much on the brake, then that would actually add more twin. So there's a digital twin of the parts of the car or the car itself that would actually track the health of the different parts. And why is that useful? Does anybody have examples of what you can do with that data? If you can have every part and the life cycle and tracked, what can you do with the data? Who's going to benefit from the data? I'm a teacher, guys. If you don't ask questions, I will pause and ask questions. So I'm going to take a sip of my tea if you want to think and tell me what you can do with the data about the health of different parts of the car. Hi, Steve. I didn't know you were here. Thank you. Yes, predictive maintenance. So you could actually, and Usha is saying, who would be interested is corporate segments, automakers. Why corporate segments? What do you mean by corporate segments, Usha? So yes, you could actually predict that a part is going to fail and then proactively maintain it. So if you think about it, for a self-driving car, this means that you could have a digital twin tracking the entire health of every part in the car. Yes, you could do recalls before something break. You could predict that it's going to break. The way at which the customer is pressing on the brake was not how the product was designed for, and you could do that. And I'm glad Steve joined me. Steve was my student this last weekend at the Stanford Autonomous Vehicle Bootcamp that I taught, and his company has a simulator for autonomous vehicles to drive. So you don't have to drive thousands, tens of thousands of miles, but instead you could actually use his simulator, and he could make it run and create all the different environments that is needed so that you can build the training model. Remember, when we got started, we said the first fundamental piece of autonomous vehicle business is you need the autonomous vehicle technology, which is all the deep learning models by which the car knows to identify objects and go in the road and drive safely. So you cannot predict every possible things that would come in the road. And Steve was showing a picture of a geese sitting I think in this driveway, and that could be something that he could include as a model in his simulation. So if you're playing with autonomous vehicle technology and building models, Steve is the guy. Steve Lemke is right here. You can see him in the comments. So Charles, thank you for joining me. Might be predictive maintenance, detect wear and tear on time. Yes. And the important thing for automakers is they do recalls, they worry about it. And, before they do recalls, they actually have this hundreds of people who actually are facing that, and everybody is not going to tell them. So if you think about it, for the digital twin to work, that information is actually going out from the car to some cloud. In fact, Volkswagen has signed up with Amazon and is using AWS as their cloud. So again, automakers do not come with the whole software lifecycle experience, and they are trying to go through this process of what is it that we offer. We don't want to make just the guys, the company which makes the car chassis, and become like the hardware in this world where the software becomes the brain of the operations. And so they are investing in the AI. They're buying companies like GM did with Cruise, or they're investing in the technologies like Ford and everybody, or they are investing in startups. Especially if you're doing a startup in that space, they are investing left and right. And Mercedes has one of those companies. Mercedes-Benz has a whole bunch of products that they are testing out using shared mobility, but they're also building out their own. They're also investing. They have their own technology. They have a voice API that's very good, and they also has testing out a whole bunch of AR, VR in the car in pilots. But they're also investing in startups. So VIA is a 12-seater autonomous vehicle startup which is funded by Mercedes. It's not wholly owned by them. I don't believe they're even majority owners. But what it does is it's saying, hey, do cities want to change public transportation with an autonomous vehicle? And we can get rid of buses, and there could be an app like a Lyft app, and on demand I could say I want to go to San Jose from Palo Alto, and they could, they would show it like we schedule the Lyft for airport pickups or something ahead of time. So I see a lot of comments. I want to see what's going on. Usha says organize. Oh, Usha commented that it's automakers and corporate segments who would be interested in the digital twin. So she says organizations such as insurance industry who are exploring AV space would love to learn about the data in the self-driving car. Yes, insurance is the number one industry that is being disrupted. It's very easy because for us to understand that, because we pay insurance on every car and they charge us random prices using some risk algorithm that they're using. And so one of the things that's happening already is Progressive is giving a dongle and say put this in the car, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're reading data from the car canvas, and they are saying, hey, based on how you're driving, we'll give you a better rate. So you don't need to pay the standard flat rate because you're a good driver. But if you're not a good driver and I'm that person who presses on the brake, then I'm going to get a bad rate. But it is going to adjust based on my behavior. I'm not aware whether Progressive gives me data back. So this goes back to how do you do product management with such products when you start creating products on top of the data in the car, like the insurance case. I don't believe they're giving me data back for me to learn and say, hey, last month they charged me, I'm just making up a number. I don't think they charge this less, but last month they charged me $100 insurance for the month, and this month they're charging me $150. And so they could actually come back and say, the reason we are charging you more is because you press more on the brake, and we saw, or you turned, you do too steep left turns or something like that, what the car is tracking. And if they say that, we could actually learn from that experience. So I was talking to somebody who works in the insurance industry, and they are saying, we are not interested in just collecting the data from the car and slapping a price and keep charging you. And the whole insurance is changing their relation with their customers. And they're saying, we are not here to just manage the risk and charge for that. We are in the business of keeping you safe. And so what they want to do is, if they can get data from the car on driving behavior, then they want to offer products by which they can actually educate you. So one example I heard was, teen drivers are considered risky drivers, and so automatically insurance premium is high for them. And why are they risky drivers? Because they're driving new in the roads and they would not behave the right way, that is the most safe way for driving the cars. But then if you could get data from that car and see that behavior, and you associate that with that being a teen, then you could actually have training programs for them saying, these are the things that you need to improve so that you can become the safest driver possible. I would love that for my teen, if somebody gives that exactly to make them a safe driver, instead of saying your premium is now higher. So that is what, when I say business model and product development, that's what I'm talking about. Not just saying here's data in the car and now we can actually, keep doing what we are doing. I believe we are not going to keep doing what we are doing. So I have seen a lot of comments. I want to go. So insurance, that is one. And another point about insurance, Usha, is in the self-driving car today, there is when the car say I'm going to drive as a self-driving car, they have to I think it's $50,000. I think they have to commit to that much money if anything goes wrong in terms of collateral. And but still there's this could be damage, could be higher, lower, and there could be who's at fault. So I remember cases where I want to say it's Uber, I believe it's Tesla. There was um, a fire truck that was reversing back, and this self-driving car was driving in the road, and people could see, it's like a normal person when I'm driving, and if something is reversing and it's kind of abnormal behavior, people would scream, and people screamed and said, hey, stop, stop, stop. And this car did not hear, because the car doesn't hear. There is no concept of taking input from the environment other than what it is seeing by perception space. And so the car saw the truck come in at an angle and tried to figure out what it was and tried to take its action to stop the car. By the time it was too late and it hit the truck. We didn't see this in news because it was the truck's fault to be doing that, and the car got scot-free. So even in those cases where you have data and information, DMV comes in and insurance companies come in and say, what are the current rules? So we are applying the rules that we have for our current humans. It sounds so strange when I say current humans, like I'm from some other world. But when you apply the rules that's for human drivers and then try to negotiate, was the car doing right or wrong? There was a Uber case where the Uber had right of way on a merge but hit somebody, and then they said, hey, it's not our fault. So there are a lot more accidents happening, which is more than what we see, and insurance is dealing with that. But that should not be the way to do that. They should be proactively building predictive models out of their data. But the point I wanted to make is, when today all we're seeing is pilots, and we go to a place where we go beyond the pilots to the cars driving autonomously. I think Waymo is the only car that has said we can drive without a human driver, and got the permit for that from California. And in Phoenix, they are driving, but I don't believe they're driving without a human driver. David Kerrigan is not here today. He might be able to tell us, because he came to US and he went all the way to Phoenix just to see the Waymo cars and see what the experience was, and get a piece of the action. And the autonomous vehicle, when it drives independently without a human in the roads, and then the insurance companies are investing in layers of tech, which are all coming from different startups, which can actually look at what is happening in the car in real time, dynamically, to figure out if something is happening and it is not the right behavior. Is it because of the hardware? Is it because of the software? Is it the LiDAR or the camera? Is it one of the spots? And dynamically shift blame or assign blame. That's what they say. And this piece of software that's been built for that. Interesting here from Steve. Okay. So Steve's talking about his simulator. It's called LG SVL Simulator. It's free and open source. So you should definitely talk to him if you want to check it out. And I would say, don't think about it, hey, I'm not building an autonomous vehicle. But if you're interested in looking at this model that you can create, Steve, you have APIs on top of that anybody can use this data. They don't need to just be just building a DL model for building an AV. Can I use do you have some API that I can use the data and create some layer of tech on top of that? So I'll wait for Steve to reply. Yes, there are APIs to control the simulator. So I think that's the beauty of it, right? Imagine, I keep talking about there is going to be APIs and layers to build apps. So this is like the world before the App Store was opened up to the public. And so think about what is possible if you have access to that data, if you have access to the simulator, and you can see what the car sees in the road. What can you do? Can you create some kind of service that would make it easy for blind people to cross the road? Can you make it easy for bikes to share the road? Has been done a lot, but I don't think it is taken. That space is taken. So road safety for different segment of customers is one thing. There could be other use cases that you could imagine. So one of the things that I do in my class, and Steve was there in my class, so he can tell you, is I don't come in my class and say, hey, this is what I've learned and this is what I know, and I'm just giving you stuff and you just take it and you learn and go away. I believe the whole connected, autonomous, what I call as the driverless world, is going to be built by all of us working together. And we need a variety of different skills to think from different perspective to come together. So I like to facilitate that conversation. So I would recommend, even here while you're chatting and listening, I would recommend, see who else is here. And if they say something that's interesting, maybe you can connect with them. So definitely, I would recommend checking out Steve's simulator. Okay, so who else? Usha is saying Waymo don't drive without a driver. Yes, thank you. That's right. Usha is in Arizona, so she can check that for us. Sorry, Usha, I forgot that. Okay. And then Steve is saying you can create and extract data from everything you like to simulate. I would like to try that. I'm just, as I'm talking now, I'm just getting very excited about if I can get a data and can simulate more things. So essentially, the simulator is like a made up world, like Second Life, right? That where this is where the car is going to drive. So one of my, Steve, I'm going to follow up offline because I would go off topic here, but one of the things that I have written about, I've been passionate about, is how the cars are here today doing pilots, and I believe there's going to be this connected world into the future, and I predict 2030 as the driverless world where this is more mainstream, not 100% but mainstream. So in the next 10 years there is going to be more of these cars that is going to be launched to drive amongst humans in the road, and the car has to share the road with the human. So I'm not seeing enough research on the communication between the human and the self-driving car. So my whole motivation to get into this space and research and start talking and thinking about this, and then I ended up writing a book. It came because I was driving back home after my Stanford classes, and the Waymo cars were driving immune of me, right? They were like, another object, I see a car, and then they go. And if this was human drivers, we would be waving at each other, we would know each other. Or if I'm too sleepy, I hope I don't drive when I'm sleepy, but if I'm driving erratically, the car is just saying object alert, and this object is behaving erratically. So it got me thinking on who are these they're testing for, and who's the customer. So Steve, I see he's sharing the link for the simulators. I'm going to make that show. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Steve. So that got me thinking. So one of the areas that I would like to test and figure out with the simulator is how can we get the car to communicate with humans? So I write articles on Axios, and I've written one of these about on the communication between pedestrians and the self-driving car. But the communication could be with the pedestrian, and I believe Ford is trying to set up a standard on how every self-driving car company should communicate using blinkers. Drive.ai even has like a big a display on the side of the car, and Waymo has a lot of signs and sounds, and Ford has the similar things, and they're trying to standardize on that. I mean, I'm not seeing everybody else coming together to standardize, but Ford has some kind of consortium they're putting together. So what is missing is when I'm a human driver in the car and there is a self-driving car next to me. In your simulator, Steve, you're going to teach the model to look at me as an object and understand perception, so that it doesn't, there's no collision. But what I want to know is, I want to see whether you can create some kind of object or something. I'm thinking I'm thinking translation from Unity 3D, so I could be wrong. But the thinking is, what I as a human in the vehicle, how do I communicate with the car? So the car is thinking of the car as the other object, but that car doesn't have the intelligence that the self-driving car has. The intelligence is with the human. And so how does the human in the car communicate with the self-driving car? And so I was thinking there are a lot of use cases and possibilities, but where I even started on building a model, but where I got stuck was I could not get enough training data. And so maybe your simulator could be something. So I would like to follow up offline. So coming back to the data in the car, so we were talking about digital twins from the parts in the car. The other thing is the vehicle itself, and what is happening inside the vehicle. So if Steve drives the car versus his wife drives his Tesla, then what is the profile of the user? And that could all is about the user profiles and the preference of their setting and everything inside the car. Could be, and it will also change dynamically when I'm going to work and I'm driving and I'm in a certain frame. I have I sit a certain way, or I like going in a certain region, area, or time of the day. I might like certain setting, all those things is one environment. Steve says there are open source training data sets available, but you can generate more training data in the simulator, and you can also test your model as well. Thank you, Steve. I definitely play with that. Okay, and I am aware of uh, data sets to understand the human who's riding in the car, right? The self-driving car is driving, and say I'm sitting or lying down, and it's taking me somewhere. And to understand the emotion of the user, to actually see whether I'm awake, alert, or health problems and all that stuff. It started with the context of giving control to the human when needed, and that's how this bunch of those models. Lex Friedman has something about gaze. When you look at the driver's gaze when an accident happened, he actually could build a DL model based on that to see how alert the driver was. So driver alertness is a very big thing that's being built everywhere, and the same driver alertness is used for truck drivers. So that is one. But I was thinking, the human who's in an adjacent car, and I think it goes back to how do you ID that person? How do you know that is the person? If a car is driving and the car is driven by me today and by my husband tomorrow. So the use case I was thinking is when there's a jaywalking pedestrian who is walking with bag of groceries, I tend to slow down and let them cross. And another person might say, hey, that we are encouraging bad behavior. They should not be jaywalking. It is not safe for them or us, and won't do that. So can the car predict me as a driver is going to slow down, and another person as a driver is not going to slow down next to them based on knowing us and our behavior? So I was thinking something like the driving behavior, but extracted out of based on a human driver. So that was my simulator thinking the other day. That I wanted to do. So going back, there could be the three digital twins, and the third one is the actual the vehicle itself. The vehicle has been taken around everywhere. What it is doing, its life cycle, where it is going, type of thing, environment, and their behavior, their preference of streaming, and all that. So those are digital twins in the car. The next layer up, I would say, is there are going to be a lot of inference models in the car, not just from the autonomous vehicle DL models. It could be AI in the car, augmented reality, virtual reality, whole bunch of them are being created. And last week I spoke about very briefly about how Nissan has this concept called I2V, invisible to visible, and they're basically connecting external data source, and you could and I think Patrick got pretty excited and said, oh, we are driving around and this is inclusive intentional commerce, not inclusive commerce, it's intentional commerce, where I'm driving around and you could actually show me what is nearby, and you are able to project a store what's happening, and you could see the apples on the shelf and you want to touch the apples. So it goes back, I mean, all these things, when the models are built, it is very theoretical, and there's a lot of it's loaded with assumptions. So are we still going to shop for apples? Am I going to take a self-driving car to drive me around and pick apples? That's an easy example to relate to. So I believe all consumables are going to go away, where they would just show up and be there in our fridge when we want to eat them. And so who's going to provide that service for me? There were, of course, Amazon does delivery and would, with a key can enter and leave the package inside. Walmart went through this exercise for a little bit and said, we will open the door and we will put the item in your fridge, stock it in your fridge. I didn't see that take off or not much noise about it, so I don't think it's live anymore. But they all have a privacy boundary that comes in. But I want you to think about the data that comes with it, right? When you build the model for this augmented reality experience or virtual reality experience, for me it's very, very exciting when you think about, hey, now we are going to interface with other objects. So the car is going to interact with other cars, that is V2V, and that is mandated for the safety of the car. So all the cars which have lidars or cameras are looking at the road, and they have some data that they're looking at. in their brain for what they're seeing from perception, and then they're going to calculate, hey, this car is going at this speed and there's somebody else, an object coming, I need to swear away, or they're making their calculation, right? That control for path planning. So the thinking with V2V is, if you could share that data, then maybe we could do path planning faster, and it would save lives because you know what the other car is thinking. So Steve, I'm thinking maybe in your simulator, instead of one of the things I have not seen happen yet is self-driving cars are building their real models on what objects are there, and then they are testing, like, Waymo is testing all over Mountain View, and I see the Apple car around Cupertino. And recently I saw Waymo come into the Sunnyvale area. I've not seen it in Cupertino, which is just the next town, but I see it closer to the Waymo area, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, where it's come further south than where it used to be. So at some point, there is going to be me driving in the road, the Waymo driving one side, and the Apple car driving another side. So I believe they don't have training data of sharing the road with another self-driving car. I think that's a very important piece. If they're all wanting us to get rid of our cars and they're just going to go drive amongst themselves, this V2V is one minimum data set that they would share so that they can see the roads. But I think a simulator can help to figure out how a Waymo car would drive versus when it shares the road. We cannot say that, as that all the cars are going to be self-driving and all of them are going to drive the same way. They're all going to follow the rules. And so if you put self-driving car A versus self-driving car B, it's all going to be the same, because I believe that the way Uber is driving, based on the internal algorithm it has and the decisions, and it has been taught where there are overrides, is going to be different from a cruise car or a Waymo car. So if you can provide, I'm talking to Steve now, if you can provide a way to create a simulation of multiple self-driving cars, blanket car A and car B, but what if you can actually help me create a model for my self-driving car, knowing how to share the road with a Uber car? And I don't know whether you can get training data of Uber cars driving, and you can simulate that from whatever data you have, and you create more simulation of, hey, this is what the Uber did at the merge, and this is how it will operate. So Steve is saying we already support multiple eco vehicles, and they can be driven by different autonomous software stack. Do you have this for so Steve has this self-driving autonomous car model creation simulators. I'm very excited about it, so I'm talking a lot about that today. So he's saying we support multiple vehicles, but will you be able to tell me what it would mean to share a car road with a Uber car versus a Waymo car or an Apple car? That would be, I think that would be your IP if you build that, even if you're putting it in open source. But that would be very unique. I don't see that in typical simulators. There's a bunch of them that I have seen superficially. I've not gone and built something in there, but it just says if you have another autonomous vehicle, it will follow rules, it will do this. But I would like to drive with an Waymo separately and drive with a Uber separately and see the difference. That would be amazing. Usha is saying, can you please repeat your question? So my question was, in the simulator, Steve is giving training data. So he would say, here's an object of a geese, if the geese is in the road. Here is various different simulation objects, and you can simulate to create the self-driving car model without spending that many thousands of hours in the road, which you need, because only when you do thousands and thousands of hours of driving for the self-driving car, the car learns, right, in terms of training. And I want to build a self-driving car which will share the road with another self-driving car. And Steve's answer is, yes, they have it in their model, that while you're driving and building a self-driving car, they have object models with training data for other self-driving cars. So you can learn to share the road with another self-driving car. My question is, I want it for specific Uber car. Especially, I would not feel comfortable if there's a Uber car, given their history, that when the Arizona accident happened, they actually had override factors that caused the car to not stop and hit the the jaywalking cyclist, because she had some kind of bag, which I think she was a homeless person. She had a bag and the shape of the cycle looked different. They could see that, but they also had an override factor. They could understand in terms of object recognition, but they also did an override, because they thought it was too much noise, because all these algorithms are still making prediction, so they're not 100% certain whether they need to stop or know what the object is. So they don't communicate with each other, but as you mentioned, Ford and Nissan and others appear to be working on a vehicle to human communication, and presumably vehicle to vehicle. I don't believe anybody is working on a vehicle to vehicle communication system that I am aware of, but Ford and a few are working on the cars communicating. I think the standard they're working on, Steve, is they are talking about cars communicating uniformly with the pedestrian. So every car, when it talks to the pedestrian, should be the same thing. So if the Uber is going to turn left in an autonomous car, the Waymo is going to turn left, or a Ford is going to turn left, there's got to be one signal. Like we put our blinkers. That's what we do. If a cyclist turns, there are hand signals. And so that needs to be standardized. I believe that's what Ford is working on. I'm not aware of where Ford is saying, I will work with another autonomous vehicle, I will communicate beyond the mandatory V2V. So I want it to be more than that. And I want them to have that learning baked in. So I'm hoping, I'll talk to you offline, but I'm hoping your simulator would help create that safety, so they can drive safely, even if the other car is erratic and if the other car is less safe. It's not just the human drivers less safe, but another autonomous vehicle with this override less safe. So I believe it's just a aspect of technology to re-engineer what could be the offsets, overrides of autonomous vehicle A based on its driving pattern, and then you put that in your model, and then I can adapt to that and build my model around that. And then the other car comes and says, okay, now what are the overrides that this car has? So I think you can get every autonomous vehicle company to come and work with you to create this happy pseudo world of what the world would be, and create the simulation. So there's a lot of opportunity there for your simulator. I'm excited for that. Okay, so I hope I answered that. So I want to go back to, we were talking about different kind of data, and so the VR and AR is overrated in terms of what is possible, and what is so they always talk about the experience. And I believe I saw Charles here. Charles is working on creating the experience inside the car, or the app experience for the car apps to communicate with the car. And all of those, there are not enough designers out there who are actually engaged in this yet. And so the inside of the car is going to change. So the excitement of VR and AR today is about, hey, how would you interact with the user and see if they're sleeping, if they don't want to be disturbed and they don't want chatty conversation, and how do you interact with them and things like that. I heard from a speaker from my class who works at Ernst & Young, Sachin Lulla. He was talking about a project. He's very passionate about inclusive mobility. And one of the things they were talking about is they built, I think he did this in IBM when he worked earlier in IBM, they built a two-way sign language communication with the autonomous vehicle car. So if you're a rider inside the self-driving car, you can communicate using sign language, and the car will communicate back with you using sign language. So instead of thinking, it is all voice. So what it means is that is another AI in the car, right? The sign for the car to do sign language, it is actually going to do some kind of model. It's like an NLP model that it is baked inside the car for it to communicate with people inside. And so that would create a new experience. So Charles, you should think about this whole sign language in the car. If you want, I can connect you with Sachin, and there might be something there. So Charles is saying, I'm keen on V2V communication, not many use cases. Maybe we can discuss next time. Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful for me when you guys ask me for something specific, because I go back to, hey, what's the autonomous vehicle business and what are the data in the car? And I kind of, meander from there each time. So if I peg it to a topic, that would be more interesting. This time I wanted to reintroduce the various data in the car, but with a lens to different industries impacted and the use cases. And Steve being here has taken us to a new world with the simulator. So think about the DL that you have to build for sign language, and maybe IBM is building that. But what I would say is there's a whole world of opportunities to build experiences in the car, build apps in the car, right? That would interact using sign language. If the car is going to talk sign language, the person is going to talk sign language. If you're going to service that audience, I don't know anybody who's building other things right now. You want to service them in various ways, right? So this whole invisible to visible, where you interact with outside data sets as the car is going through a space, that takes a whole different dimension. You can produce a certain insight, but how do you communicate that insight is an assumption that it's going to be a screen or it's going to be voice. And now you add another element saying now that's going to be sign language. And if you have a combination of people and one person, it's inclusive, and somebody is talking sign language and somebody is watching the screen and somebody wants voice, and it just adds complexity to the design. But I would go back to the tech that you need to build to make that happen. And then in this case, maybe you can create a layer of translation text tech for sign language interface, and then you could actually offer other people to build apps on top of that, or there could be a whole licensing model in there. So what is not clear in all this is who is ultimately going to own the digital identity so that they have the interface with the customer. Is it even going to be one people or two people, or or somebody else, right? So based on that, who is going to pay who in this tech stack inside the car? That is not known. I think we did not do well in terms of thinking through this when we got to mobile, and then we ended up with Apple and Android fighting each other, and each with their own identity of us, tying back to everything else they know about us. Uber is trying to do that for multimodal transportation, saying it's all Uber ID, and then as you hop across multiple devices, many cities are doing that. I briefly talked about that. If that's of interest, I can talk about it another day. The whole idea of multimodal transportation and data that the vehicles are giving to the city in a very specific data format called mobile data specification. And different cities are creating this data. They call it data OS. I don't know why they call it data OS, but they call it data OS. And about this whole transportation data from multiple kind of modes of transportation. And there's tons of data sitting, and the cities are exposing that as API, and you could actually build services. So I've always alluded to, hey, there is data standards, and LA is doing this, or Amsterdam has the data, or Barcelona has the Centilio system, but we haven't gone through that. So is that of interest? Then we can talk about that. Because when we talk about V2V, you'll have to talk as the next step to V2X, which is car talking to the city and car talking to the infrastructure and the like. So I want to pause here. We talked about data in the car, and we said digital twins and get data out of the CAN bus, and we spoke about how insurance likes it. We can do predictive maintenance, car companies like it. We spoke about Steve Lemke's simulator. The URL is right here, so take a look. And it's LGSV. It's LGSV. If you forget everything else, I'm sure you can say LGSV simulator and you can find them. And it's open source. And there's a lot of possibilities of what you can do. And the simulator seems like a safe place to go build models and try that out. And it comes back to who's going to pay for it. If I would like to do this exercise with many, many, many industries. If you're game with that, we can do that next week. If you're thinking about specific industries and say, okay, and retail is my favorite example because I worked in eBay and e-commerce for a long time, so I go back to that. But if you give me any other industry, even if I'm not familiar with it, I'm totally okay. I'm happy to go through that exercise with you. Okay. Any questions, comments? Anybody wants to add anything, say something? Charles, do you want to tell us about what you're focused on in terms of, maybe you cannot give your client name, but you're working on something about the experience in the car, right? Is that why you're interested in V2V, or that is separate project? Do you want to tell us anything about the experience in the car? Nope. It's a secret. Charles doesn't want to talk about it. Okay. So we have 5 more minutes. So as I wrap up, one of the things I want to leave you with is, we talked about the actual data, which is the digital twins in the car, the AI in the car at a very superficial level. I would like to go deeper on, when you say AI in the car, and there's an inference model, so you need training data to build that inference model. But there is data that every time you put a piece of AI, there is training data to build that AI, and then the AI is constantly learning. That means it's gathering more data. So then it becomes a living, breathing thing, and there is more and more data for the AR, for the VR, for the integration of the interaction of the customer. You expected them to behave a certain way, they're behaving some other way. So all that data creates a lot more opportunities in terms of storage, in terms of building inference models, in terms of we have this thing called algorithmic transparency law that is coming out in US. We don't know if it's a bill. We don't know whether it will become a law. um, in that case, whether, when you're collecting all this data and you're building the AI algorithms, you might get to a place of regulation where you have to say, hey, this is how the AI is making decisions. And those of you who know how deep learning models are built, neural networks with thousands of layers, it is impossible to actually track that. So the way the compliance would happen is not actually in the neurons on what path it took and what decision it made, but going back to the training data. Was the training data, what were the factors in the training data? Was the training data offering certain factors? Essentially, that's what it's called, certain feature sets is included, and was there a weight override on that? All those things will come out, and I don't know how this is going to get to a common man language for us to see it one day when there is algorithmic transparency. But if you're working in that space, building any kind of AI, I want you to think about the data that you'll collect, the store, the compute, and it takes us to edge. We have, again, edge analytics is one of those topics I've been alluding to. I want to talk about edge analytics from the context of a business model, not just here's the tech and you can, you can do compute on the edge. But I want to think about business models that comes with it, and we'll talk about that. Charles is saying something. So I was asking Charles a question about building experience in the car on a project he's doing, and why he was asking about V2V and V2X. And he says, yes, that's why I'm interested in V2V, working on improving the driving experience by sharing data from the car to the user, to the city. So we are looking at communication, privacy, data, user incentive. Yeah. Thank you, Sudha. Anyone wants to connect, share ideas, we can connect. So you can talk to Charles. Charles is a brilliant designer. He comes with service design experience, and one of the gems in the world. He's in Europe, and you should talk to him. So he's working on this experience for some OEM, or for some companies offering that for the OEM, about the driving experience by sharing data from the car to a variety of integrations. So again, it reiterates the point that, think of the data. When you think of the experience, it's very easy to make up an experience. Say, this is what it's going to be, I'm going to build for that. I want you to think of not just one data stream and start, building up your use case, but there is value really being created only when there is integration of these use cases, like the car drives and you have the lat long and you know what's nearby, and you can combine with another data source from a retail store example I was giving. You could and you obviously have to cater to privacy. There's a concept of privacy by design architecture to do that. But the point I want to make is, you're going to have integration of multiple data sources. The easy example you always see is combining with weather data. And I don't want to minimize the need to combine with weather data. That is important in terms of safety or what we would do. uh, but I think there's a lot more data sources that's out there, especially if cities collecting all this transactional data of every car and every vehicle, every scooter that is being shared. There's tons of data, or what are the hotspots where these scooters are being collected. So if you have information of a lot of scooters abandoned at a certain place, what does that mean? That means that many people got off the scooter and they are around somewhere. So then you have an opportunity to cater to their needs based on what they're trying to do. Steve is saying, Charles, find me at LinkedIn. You should model V2E and V2X in our simulator, as we also support hundreds of non-player cars that drive around randomly and interact with the environment and infrastructure. That's awesome. Steve, I would like to see your car. I know you have a real car driving around and collecting training data. I would love to see that. And if it's okay, maybe I can bring a group of, maybe not hundreds of them, but maybe like 5, 6 of them. So if that's okay, then maybe we can talk offline. Okay, so I've come to the end of my hour. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate the questions and the interaction. Make sure that you connect with each other too. And Steve wanted, yes, we should do that sometime. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Steve. So Steve is offering me a ride on his autonomous vehicle car, and I'm going to be part of his training data. So, okay. So, yes, thank you, Usha. I'm always glad you like this. You're the first one to join. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I have this Business of Autonomous Vehicle data course. My early bird pricing is over, so now my new price is $700, and Usha was one of the first people who joined in the early people who joined in the with the early bird price. And so this week I'm going to be starting one-on-one mentoring sessions with everybody. So Usha, definitely follow up offline. We should do that. And then from next week, I will still do this on Wednesday with you all. And since Charles wants to focus on B2X, I would take that unless you have any other recommendation. And I would bring the data angle and the business model angle. We can go deeper on that. Thank you, everyone. Yes. And what I would do is after this, from next Thursday, I'm going to do my live session for my new batch of students online about autonomous vehicle business data. And so check it out on Driverless World School if that's of interest to you. And for those of you who signed up for the free autonomous vehicle business course, I'm actually adding a lot more content. I promised I would. And from this week, I have some. I'm not adding videos yet. That's more work for me yet already. But I'll be adding some decks from the class speakers and stuff that you might find interesting. Okay, good. I like it when people are connecting with each other. So please continue to do that. And with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I will focus on V2V, V2X, and the whole data transfer and the business model that comes with it, and plan for that for next Wednesday. And meantime, if you have anybody who would be interested in the business of autonomous vehicle data, talk to me or send them my way. And I will see you guys next week. Thanks, pal. Bye.